Thank you very much for the invitation to come and to share. Um, for the next 4 evenings, we're going to be sharing principles that are not just for parents. Now, for those of you who have paid attention to the advertising, you might have noticed that the title for this evening's presentation is different from what was advertised. The title was Raising Emotionally Healthy Children, but that's the only thing that's changed is the title. The presentation is the same, but I changed the title in order to give a more accurate representation of what the content is, because in order to raise emotionally healthy children, we have to be emotionally intelligent parents. But this presentation, the principles that I'm going to share are not just for parents. They're for everybody who has influence over young people, whether we're grandparents, whether we're teachers, or whether we're any relatives or anybody who has influence over young people. The principles I'm going to share with you are applicable. So we're looking at emotionally intelligent parenting. And thank you, Kevin, for the song that you played earlier. I'm a great fan of Jonathan McReynolds. Make a cathedral out of me, and it's a very relevant song for this presentation, as you will see at the end of the presentation. But we'll have to wait to see why that is so relevant. So, emotionally intelligent parenting. Let me begin by just giving a summary of what emotional intelligence is. I have a whole presentation that I can do on the topic, but I'm just going to give you a snippet, as a short summary of what emotional intelligence is. So first of all, to be emotionally intelligent, you have to be able to recognize and identify your emotions. There is a rumor that there is a particular gender that is better at this than another gender, but we won't go too deeply into that. But emotional intelligence requires the ability to be able to recognize the emotions that we are experiencing. And then emotional intelligence requires that we can manage our feelings. So, for example, I may know that I have a problem with anger, but if I don't know how to manage my anger, how to regulate that emotion, the knowledge that I have a problem with anger is no good to me. So not only should I be able to recognize my emotions, but I need also to be able to regulate those emotions. So emotional intelligence involves how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to our own emotions, but they also deal with how we relate to the emotions of others. So emotionally intelligent people are able to recognize and be sensitive to the emotions in others. We probably know people who are not. But when we are sensitive to the emotions of others, that enables us to be able to manage our relationships effectively. Because if I know that if I speak to you in a certain way, it's going to have an adverse effect on you, then I can modify the way I speak so that I can accomplish the purpose that I'm seeking to achieve. So that's emotional intelligence in a nutshell. It's how we regulate our own emotions and then how we intelligently relate to the emotions of other people. Now, Daniel Goleman, who kicked off the whole kind of area of emotional intelligence in the 1990s when he wrote this book. And interestingly enough, he wrote it in order to instruct business people how to be successful in business, but it's snowballed since then. But he wrote in his book, Emotional Intelligence, this: family life is our first school of emotional learning. In this intimate cauldron, we learn how to feel about ourselves, how others will react to our feelings, how to think about these feelings, and what choices we have in reacting, how to read and express hopes and fears. So he is stating something that is very much in line with what the Bible teaches us, that the family is the place where we learn primarily. It's a place where we learn how to relate to other people in healthy ways. This is the reason why God brought the family into existence, to pass on his values from one generation to another. But Goldman states very clearly that this is the place where we learn how to regulate, how to deal with our emotions. Brilliant book written by Dr. John Gottman. Highly recommend it. Raising an emotionally healthy child. And John Gottman, he's done brilliant research for over 30 years in the area of family, marriage, parenting. And he says this about raising an emotionally intelligent child. He says the greatest predictor of how a child will turn out is not intellectual ability. It is how well they get on with other children. And this is so important because as parents, we can spend so much time making sure that our children get into the best schools and they have a good intellectual education that will set them on a good footing to get a good job, etc., etc., etc. But the reality is, what will help them to progress in life more so is their ability to be able to develop healthy relationships. It has been said that intellectual ability, IQ, will get you hired, but EQ will get you promoted. So it's important for us as parents to give our children the best education that we can. That education should include how to deal with their emotions and how to develop healthy relationships. So, who we are and how we engage with the world are much stronger predictors on how our children will turn out than what we know about parenting. So it's about what they see in us. It's about what we model to them. Children will learn more about what they see. They will follow our example more than they will follow our words. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, we have the Hebrew prayer, the Shema. And in that Hebrew prayer, the children of Israel were instructed to love the Lord their God with all their hearts, with all their minds, and with all their strength. And that laid the foundation for then passing on God's values to their children. So in order for us to be able to raise our children spiritually healthy, emotionally healthy, intellectually, even physically healthy, we have to have God's love, God's principles working in our hearts so that we can transfer them to our children. So, how to parent strategies can be seductive and dangerous. It's interesting that in the tips we just got, one of the instructions for parents was that treat children equally, and that's good advice. But here's the thing: we should love our children the same, but we don't necessarily treat them the same because they are different people. So children will respond to different things, and I'll unpack this a little later on. But the love that we give them should not be, as was so rightly said, should not be partial. But how we relate to the children should recognize their individuality. So parenting is not a kind of, as the Americans say, a cookie cutter. It's not a one size fits all. And we get this from Proverbs 22 verse 6, which says, "Train up a child in the way he shall go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Now, we often misinterpret what this passage is saying. We kind of read the passage as saying, train up a child in the way we think they should go. But no, that's not what he says. It says, train a child in the way that he should go. And the way, from the Hebrew, it's talking about the leaning or the bent of the child. Recognize who the child is, what their strengths are, what their abilities are, what their temperament is, and then guide them according to who they are. So we cannot put square pegs into round holes. So, and this is something that John Gottman pointed out. He said the heart of effective parenting is our ability to connect emotionally with our children. The heart of effective parenting is our ability to connect emotionally with our children. Now, it is significant that in the book of Malachi, what is known as the Elijah message, Malachi chapter 4 from verse 5 says this: "See, I will send you the prophet Elijah before the great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers." And it's interesting that the last day message, just before Jesus comes, will be a message that brings about reconciliation in family relationships. And I think that it is so important. Okay, so empathy is the foundation of emotionally intelligent parenting. Now, what is empathy? Well, empathy is the ability to step into somebody else's world. The Native Americans have this saying: "Do not judge a man until you have walked 2 moons in his moccasins." And the idea is that we need to step into somebody else's world in order to understand where they're coming from. Now, when it comes to parenting, this is a challenge because as parents, we were children a very long time ago, some of us. And so we have to think back to what it was like to be a child in order to be able to empathize with our children. So we need to step into their world and try and see the world from their perspective, in order to guide them in the right direction and in order to understand them. So Romans chapter 12 and verse 15 says this: "Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep." And again, this is a classic passage about empathy. It means entering into somebody else's experience in order to understand them and to have compassion for them. All right, so here are 4 styles of relating to children's emotions. And think about, and when we go through them, think about your own experience, where you would put yourself and put the experience, your parented experience in this chart. And also maybe reflect on how you parent your own children or relate to the children who are around you. So there is what's called laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is a type of parenting where there is very little controls, very little in terms of boundaries, and it can be a mistaken form of kindness when we allow children to do whatever they want to do, and the idea that we just try to make them happy. But the point is that if children do not grow with healthy boundaries, it will be to their detriment later on. So that's the laissez-faire. That's the type of parenting where children call their parents by their first name and that kind of thing. Then there is the emotion dismissing. Emotion dismissing is where a parent doesn't really engage with the emotions that a child expresses. Rather, they will try and distract or ignore their emotions, and they won't try to get to the root of what that emotion is, because all emotions come from somewhere. And it's important for us as parents to understand the root of the emotion. So emotion dismissing, this type of parenting often results in unmet needs, because if there's a real good reason why the child is feeling a particular type of emotion and we don't explore that, then we may that's like an itch that doesn't get scratched as a need that is not met. Emotion dismissing parenting also demonstrates a lack of control to a degree. Then there is emotion disapproving. So emotion disapproving parenting kind of takes emotion dismissing to another level. Not only does it ignore the emotion that a child is experiencing, but it can actually punish children for their emotion. I grew up in a household with a dad who was harsh. He was emotionally dismissive, and you could not express anger around him, because if you got angry over something, he would punish you for your anger in addition to whatever it was that you got angry about. So it's very dangerous to punish children for their emotions, because they will tend to then stifle those emotions, suppress them, and emotions that are suppressed will come out, but oftentimes they will come out in unhealthy ways. It can be detrimental not only to mental health, emotional health, but even to our physical health. And emotion dismissing can breed hostility. My dad was harsh when it came to punishments, and in me that just built a lot of anger and built a lot of resentment. So it's often characterized by excessive restrictions, rules that are too harsh. Then there is the last one, which is emotion coaching, and this is what we want to be aiming for in the styles that we raise our children with. So it is characterized by appropriate limits, healthy boundaries. Children need to know who is the parent, but they also need to experience warmth. They need to experience love, and when they experience these things, they learn how to express their emotions in healthy ways. Okay, so our child's emotions of sadness, fear, or anger don't just disappear because we say, "Stop that crying." Sometimes it is because we are uncomfortable with the emotion that we try and shut it down. We say things like, "I give you something to cry about," and that type of thing. We're trying to avoid engagement with an emotion that makes us feel uncomfortable, but that doesn't help. That doesn't help the child. Now, obviously, there are some children who will push buttons and they will throw tantrums, and there we need to be very boundaried, and let children know what is appropriate behavior and what is not appropriate behavior. And if the behavior is inappropriate, then we need consequences that go along with the boundaries that we set, so that the child will know that it's not in their best interest to continue with inappropriate behavior. But balancing that with the fact that there is a reason why children kick off. There is a reason why children experience emotions, and it's important to explore that. So emotion disapproving tells children that their legitimate emotions are bad or wrong. And again, to repeat myself, that's when they start suppressing emotions, which is detrimental for them later on. Now, for very young children, feeling unlovable is a threat to their survival, and they will come up with all types of means in order to either soothe themselves or to deal with the emotions that they are experiencing, and that can result in unhealthy development of habits. They will find whatever it is that helps to soothe them. That can become an addiction or a problem for them later on, whether it's alcohol, whether it's gaming, whether it's pornography, or what have you. So children need healthy outlets for their emotions. And if their emotions become too problematic, if they become too painful, they will look for ways to anesthetize those emotions, which is where we see the development of unhealthy patterns of behavior. Proverbs 18 and verse 21 says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." Our words are powerful. We can destroy people with our words, but we can also build people up with our words. So we need to be very careful about what we say to our children. I remember listening to a minister, friend of mine, who was giving a testimony, and he spoke about how when he was a teenager, his mother said to him, "I wish you were never born." And as he gave his testimony, the tears were flowing down his face because those words cut him so deeply. So our words are powerful. We need to be careful how we use them. Children need to be taught how to regulate their emotions. So we need to give them the tools. We need to give them the instructions. So help them to learn how to deal with anger when they are angry. There are principles that we can share with them that will help them to not only recognize why they are experiencing emotion, but how to handle those emotions going forward. The Bible says, "Be angry, but do not sin." So one of the things that we need to make clear to our children is that their emotions are not bad. We mistakenly attach moral values to emotions. So when we think of anger, for example, or we think anger is a bad emotion, or we think about jealousy. Jealousy is a bad emotion. Well, no, they're not bad emotions because they're just emotions. What determines moral values are choices that we make. So, for example, if my wife is giving undue attention to another man, it's appropriate for me to be jealous. In fact, there would be a problem if I wasn't jealous. So the jealousy is not the problem. If I go hunting for that individual to do them physical harm, then I've made a bad choice as a result of my emotions. But the emotion is not the problem. And it's clear from this passage. Be angry. Go ahead. Experience your emotions. Feel your anger, but do not choose to sin. So our children need to understand this. I mean, we should not make them feel bad simply because they are experiencing an emotion, but we need to have healthy boundaries in place so that they don't make bad choices as a result of those emotions. Now, we can spend a lot of time teaching practical tasks, but little time teaching children how to handle those complex emotions. And so we need to be balanced in the education of our children. The more we hide our emotions, the less we give our children a role model of how to handle difficult emotions. I mean, how are they going to learn? Especially children who learn by what they observe. But if we spend all of our time keeping a lockdown on our emotions and we don't express those emotions or demonstrate to them how to handle those emotions, how are they going to learn? Now, obviously, we need to be intelligent about how much emotions we show. We don't want to traumatize our children. We don't want to have big full-blown arguments in front of them. But it's important for them to know that sometimes we get angry, but that our anger can be motivated by our love for them in the same way that God gets angry with us, but his love his wrath is motivated by his anger. So it's important for children to know that sometimes we get angry and to know why we get angry. And it's because of the care and the love that we have for them. So the effect of emotion training, and this is so important. Children tend to be more confident. They do better at school. And one of the reasons for that is that children who can regulate their emotions in healthy ways are able to deal with stress more effectively. And what research has shown is that children who come from dysfunctional homes where there's a lot of stress, a lot of turmoil, have a lot of stress hormones in their system, which impacts the effective functioning of the prefrontal cortex, their ability to be able to concentrate, to be able to retain information. So poor family experience inevitably results in poor performance in school because children can't concentrate effectively. Children who are emotionally trained tend to have fewer behavioral problems, do have better overall health, simply because they're not experiencing that levels of stress within their system. They get on better with others. They handle their parents' marital conflicts better. So we're going to look at 5 steps of emotion coaching, and we'll unpack those as we go through. But these skills I'm going to share with you are skills that we already possess. We don't need to go on any college courses to learn them. We already possess them. And I'll give you a quick example. I was at camp meeting, And I was in my chalet, which was on the first floor, heard a car horn toot. Look out the window, and the car park backs onto the wall, the chalets, and what had happened was somebody had double parked in front of an elder that I knew who needed to get out to go and pick up somebody at the station. And as soon as the elder saw this car parked, blocking his way, he got very agitated and started grumbling to himself, tooting his car horn, trying the door to see whether or not it was open. His wife came out. She started grumbling too, and the two of them were just complaining and complaining. And then eventually, the owner of the car came round the corner. The elder turned, looked to him, and said, "Oh, Pastor, it's you." Now, I know the elder. And had that been somebody else, had that been a young person, and the response might have been very different. But the point about that illustration is that in any given situation, we choose our response. We choose how we're going to react, how we're going to talk, how are we going to behave. So the skills that I'm about to share with you, we already possess. So number one, be aware of your child's emotions. Now, be aware of children's emotions requires that we are aware of our own. Because going back to what I said in the beginning, emotional intelligence, we need to be emotionally intelligent in order to be sensitive to our children's emotions. The Bible says, again, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. You can't lead somebody on a journey that you are not traveling yourself. So we have to make sure that we are emotionally intelligent. I love this from Ellen White. She says, if the parents would enter more fully into the feelings of their children and draw out what is on their hearts, it would have a beneficial influence upon them. So she's saying that we need to enter into the feelings of our children. Now, how the dickens do we do that? How do you enter into the feelings of children? Well, we've got to talk to them. We've got to engage with them. How are you feeling? What's going on for you? And that means that we need to be safe people for our children. Because none of us, even as adults, we do not bear our hearts with people with whom we don't feel safe. So we need to create an environment where our children feel safe to share their emotions with us. And she says we need to enter into those feelings. Going back to what we were saying about empathy, means we need to take time to engage with them. And then she says, draw out what is on their hearts. This is very intentional language, because sometimes, especially when our children hit the teenage years, that they, when we ask them questions, they can become very monosyllabic. How was school? Fine. How you doing? All right. And sometimes we need to probe a little. We need to dig a little deeper. We need to try and draw out what is going on for them. And that probing can sometimes open the door to very fruitful, helpful conversations for them. So as parents, we need to be proactive. In every situation, there is a stimulus and there is a response. And how, the freedom to choose determines whether or not we grow as individuals or whether or not we diminish. So we have the freedom to choose in any given situation how we respond. So emotionally intelligent parents are proactive rather than reactive. If we are not emotionally intelligent, our children can sometimes push our buttons. It was Barry Black who said that our children can drive us to the very borders of insanity, the very borders of sanity. sometimes they do know how to push our buttons. And if we are not emotionally intelligent to be able to regulate our own emotions and to recognize that, what's coming is not about me, it's about what's going on for them, and to be able to remain calm and not react, that is so important in creating a healthy environment where we can develop healthy relationships with our children. So, don't react to their emotions. Be proactive in digging and trying to find out what's going on beneath this display of emotion. So, number 2, recognize emotional expression as an opportunity for intimacy and teaching. So, children need parents most when they are sad or angry or afraid. Now, for the emotion dismissing and the emotion disapproving, the very time when their children need them is the time where they put a distance between themselves and their children. And here is the danger: that if we do not make ourselves the safe place, the outlet that our children can access in order to express what's going on in their lives, they will find somebody with whom they can share their hearts. And sometimes we may not be too happy with who they choose. So it's vitally important that we make sure that we are the safe place that our children can come to. Psalm 103 verse 13, as a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. Crisis allows opportunities to empathize and build intimacy with our children. Now, any of us, whenever we go through a traumatic experience, we will take note of the people who were present for us, who helped us through those occasions. So it's important that when our children experience whether it's grief or whether it's they failed an exam or whether they go through or any kinds of problems, they will remember that we were there for them, to hold them up, to give them a hug, to give them that pep talk, just to be present with them while they go through their difficulties. So this creates an opportunity for us. And as difficult as it is to see our children suffer, this provides the opportunity for us to draw closer to them. In the same way that God, when we go through our difficulties, and sometimes we might even feel that God is not present for us, that's the time where he presses the closest to us. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 from verse 3, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our tribulation. So we need to be, because of the experiences that we have gone through, and the fact that we have come through them, that gives us an experience that we can share with our children. We need to comfort them with the comfort wherewith we have been comforted. One of the best times to teach about emotions is in the moment, especially for young children. Because if we put a distance between the incident and the teaching moment, then it's difficult for children to connect the two. So it's important to teach in the moment, as long as we are emotionally calm enough to do so. Remember that our child's anger is not necessarily a challenge to our authority. This goes back to what I was saying before about trying to understand what the root of the emotion is. Now, sometimes it may be a challenge to our authority. The more children grow, the more they will try to push those boundaries. But that goes back to what I was saying earlier about making sure we have appropriate boundaries in place with appropriate consequences so that they don't get away with inappropriate behavior. But it may not be about challenging our authority. It may simply be that they're going through something, they don't know how to handle it, and so they lash out because they don't have the emotional skills, they don't have the vocabulary to express what's going on for them. Address feelings that are in low intensity before they escalate. So you got a picture of a little girl there in the dentist's seat. And, it might have been helpful before she sat in that chair for her parents to explain what was going to be happening. We're going to the dentist and they're going to put you in a big chair and he's going to put something in your mouth just to try and get an idea what's going on, and it's not going to hurt. And when the fear is in low intensity, deal with it there, because as it escalates, it can be difficult to bring it back down to a calm level, put it that way. If we empathize with our children in a small crisis, then they are more likely to come to us in the big ones. One of the most powerful things that we can do for our children is to say sorry. And because we are not perfect parents, we will always mess up. And when we do mess up, it's important for us to hold our hands up and let our children know that we know how to take responsibility for our bad choices, and that models to them that they can do the same. Number 3, listening empathetically and validating feelings. Now, to show empathy to our children, we need to slow down and give them our full attention. I remember one time when my daughter, she must have been about maybe 3, and I was working on the computer. And you know how it is when children, they come up and they start talking and you're not really listening to them, and you're doing, and what she did was she came to the right up close to where I was. She put her finger on my chin and turned my head so that I was looking at her in the face. And she said her piece, and then after a few seconds, she was off doing whatever she was doing. But it taught me a lesson, that at times when our children want our attention, we need to slow down. The Bible talks about us seeking God's face, and that's about seeking God's attention. So sometimes we need to slow down so that we can give our children the time that they need. I've got a cartoon in another presentation of a little boy is trying to get the attention of his dad, and his dad saying, "Not now, not now." And then the next scene, the little boy he's a little older and he's trying to get the attention of his dad, and his dad saying, "Not now, son." And the third, still the same, he's older and he's trying to get the attention of his dad, and his dad saying, "Not now, son." And then the fourth picture is the dad trying to get the attention of the boy, and the boy saying, "Not now, Dad." We have a narrow window of opportunity to build healthy relationships with our children. Let's not waste that opportunity. 2 Chronicles chapter 7 from verse 14, God says, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and do what? Seek my face, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin." We can do a lot of harm by invalidating children's feelings. We say things like, "There's nothing to be scared of," and "you should be happy, and don't be silly, you can do it, and you're not scared of a little spider, are you?" And we just shove their feelings aside, where it can be more effective just to spend a little time to explore. Well, what is it about spiders that makes you scared? Just take the time to engage rather than dismiss. When our children start talking about their feelings, resist the urge to apply logic. Now, apparently, there is a gender that is particularly guilty of trying to apply logic all the time. When our children engage with us, it's important for us just to listen. I remember my daughter one time, when she was in school, I picked her up from school and she got in the car, and as soon as she got in the car, she just started and and I had to sit and bite my tongue because as she was talking, I had the urge to kind of say, well, what did you? Well, why didn't you? Well, why don't you? But I recognized, I'd learned my lesson at that point that it's important just to listen, give the opportunity to tell the story. That in and of itself is effective intervention. And eventually, when she ran out of steam, then that you can start engaging. I had a similar experience with my wife. Came home from work one time and she was telling me about problems that she was having at work. And I start making all kinds of suggestions about what she did. And she stopped me and she said, could you please give me some credit? Don't you think that I have already considered all of that? I don't want you to solve the problem. I just want you to listen. Listening is powerful. It also can be hard work, listening, but it's important to just be that listening ear, so that the other person, our children, can tell their story and to somebody who empathizes and has compassion for them. Sharing examples from our own life can also be effective in an effective way to demonstrate our understanding. So look back into your own childhood experience for examples that you can use that will normalize what your child is going through. Because a lot of times the things we go through, we think it's just me. But if we can then say, well, when I was your age, I did such and such, and this is what happened to me, and I can think, okay, well, if Daddy went through that, and if Mummy had that experience, then this is just life. This is normal. So normalize. Number 4, helping your children label their emotions with words. We've already said before, words are powerful. The more words we have, the more effectively we can communicate. So, for example, if I said to you that I'm angry, that will tell you nothing about the level of my anger. But if I said to you that I am mildly irritated, that will give you a better picture of the level of my anger. If I said that I am incandescent with rage, that will give you a better idea. So the more detailed vocabulary that we can use, the more effectively that we can communicate. So anger may be annoyance, maybe frustration, rage, jealousy, sadness, might be loneliness, emptiness, tearfulness, heartbreak. The more words we give to our children, the better they can communicate what's going on for them. The reason why children throw tantrums oftentimes is that they don't have the vocabulary to explain what's going on for them. Now, I showed this picture to my son again when he was a little boy, and I asked, what do you think this baby's feeling? And he made a suggestion, and then he quickly changed it and said boredom. Yeah. Body language. It's important for us to recognize body language. What our children may be speaking words, but are their words consistent or congruent with their behavior? When I'm counseling, you might have somebody sitting in front of you saying, yeah, they really hurt me, and I don't care how they feel, and their words are saying one thing, but their whole body language, is saying something very different. So it's important when we're dealing with our children, not only to listen to the words that they are saying, but also to recognize what's going on in their body language. All right, last one, number 5, set limits and help your child problem solve. Now, appropriate limits allow us to acknowledge our child's emotions without allowing inappropriate behavior. So it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to kick doors. It's okay for you to be angry with your sister, but it's not okay for you to hit. So we set the boundary on the behavior, but we allow appropriate expression of the emotion. There is a traffic light system, and forgive me, it should be red, yellow, and green, but I'm using a green screen and it doesn't like the green. It turns it black, but that should be green. The red light system. So red light behavior is behavior that cannot be tolerated under any circumstances. It's just a complete no-no. But there is also amber behavior. Now, what is amber behavior? Well, that's behavior that is not generally allowed, but it's tolerated. And this is special circumstances. So amber behavior is for learners. So, for example, your child comes home and they say a bad word, but they don't know what the bad word means. Well, okay, so you might give them a little leeway, and but you tell them, what the word means, or that it is simply a bad word and it's not appropriate to use that word. So you're not going to punish them for that. But if they then choose to use that word after you've told them that it's inappropriate, then that's a different circumstances. So you're going to give a little leeway for children as they learn. Also for hard times. Sometimes our children's behavior may be symptomatic of stress that they are going through. They've got exams coming up and they're fearful, and they may be a little short-tempered, they may be tired, they may have just gone through a bereavement, and in those circumstances, we may give some leeway for inappropriate behavior because of the circumstances. But then there is the green light behavior, and that's behavior that is allowed and desired. Red zone behavior, the red traffic light behavior, involves behavior that is dangerous to themselves or others, illegal, immoral, unethical, or socially acceptable. And these are not allowed under any circumstances. They're not allowed to hurt themselves, they're not allowed to hurt other people, and they're not allowed to hurt things. So, yeah. Children should be clear about consequences for breaking or following rules. So, if you haven't let your children know what is appropriate and what is not appropriate, then you're not really in a position to really hold them accountable for making bad choices when you didn't tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing. The reason why God was able to hold Adam and Eve accountable and hold the angels in heaven accountable was because they knew what the boundaries were. And they went ahead and transgressed them anyway. So we need to be very clear with our children what the consequences, not only what the rules are, but also what the consequences are of breaking or following those rules. The limits we set should allow our children to keep their sense of dignity and self-respect. One time, my daughter, I think she was in her early teens, and she went to. I took her to Pizza Hut to meet up with her friends, and I left them there and was going to come back to pick her up. And when I came back, I went into the restaurant and to pick her up, and as I approached the table, she said, "Oh, Daddy, we're not ready yet. Go and wait in the car." And I was just about to let fly, and I thought, okay, she's sitting with her friends. Let me not chew her out in front of her friends. And so I swallowed it back down and I simply said to her, "You have 5 minutes, then you come." And when she got in the car, we had the conversation. But yeah, don't embarrass your children, especially your teens, in front of their friends. Allow them to maintain their dignity and self-respect. Um, to learn hopefulness, children need relationships that are characterized by boundaries, consistency, and support. And again, that comes back to the premise of this presentation is that in order to raise emotionally healthy children, we need to be emotionally healthy adults. Remember that it is impossible to emotion coach all the time. And what the research shows, John Gottman's research, is that the most effective emotion coaching parents are only doing it 40% of the time. So you're not going to get it right. And when we don't get it right, we need to be able to hold our hands up and apologize to our children. But as a parent, cut yourself some slack, because there is no such thing as a perfect parent. Parenting is very much a kind of on-the-job training. There is no manual that can tell you what to do in every given situation. So we do the best that we can with what we have. To conclude, there is a story told of a man who approached a village. And as he approached the village, he saw some men who were doing some work. And he approached the first man and he asked the man, "Well, what are you doing?" And the man said, "Well, I'm laying bricks. I'm laying bricks. That's what I'm doing. I'm a bricklayer. So yeah, laying bricks." And he approached another man who was working on the same project, and he said, "Well, what are you doing?" And the man said, "Well, I'm earning a living. You know, I'm working to put food on the table and for my family and clothes on their backs. That's what I'm doing. I'm earning a living." And he went to the third man who was working on the same project, and he said, "Well, what are you doing?" And the third man said, "I'm building a cathedral." Three individuals, all working on the same project, but with different perspectives. It is said that we who cut mere stones must always be envisioning cathedrals. And how that applies to parenting is that, there's a lot of things that we do, everyday tasks of life. But our primary task as parents is to prepare our children for the kingdom. All the practical things that we do for them may feed into their growth, into becoming healthy human beings. But it's all part of the great plan of helping them to become candidates for the kingdom of God. And the song that was played before, "Make a Cathedral Out of Me," when we are the cathedral that God can inhabit, we give our children the safe place that they can come to in order for they themselves to become cathedrals. Thank you very much for your attention. God bless you.
Amen. Amen. Amen indeed.
Amen.
Thank you so very much, Pastor Ackie. There's so much that you've kind of left us to actually think about. That thing about being a cathedral and making cathedrals is important. And also the thing that you talked about, that if you're going to be raising emotional, healthy children, then we ourselves have to have that as well.
Yeah.
The other thing that's stuck on my mind as well was the thing that you said about take time to just listen, not to give up, but just listen. And when you give the opportunity, the children would actually want to engage in a very real way. And that listening is powerful, but also that it can be hard work. That definitely stays with me. So thank you so very much.
Pleasure.
Is there any questions? Because I know, is there anybody while we were listening to Pastor, was there any questions that anybody had that they want to raise? Okay, Janine, is that Janine? Yeah, Janine, you have a question for Pastor?
Hi, yes, I did have a question. I've got a teenage niece, and it just, you know, you told me the story about the Pizza Hut or whatever, and it just reminded me of an incident that happened with my niece. And obviously, it's, you know, it's their unique age, and I just wanted your advice because obviously with your daughter, for example, you gave her that period where you kind of spoke to her. But what if you've had that conversation, for example, and I'm not talking about me as an aunt, I'm talking about, you know, with your actual child. Yeah. You've had those kind of conversations with her, and they are deliberately, or it seems as though they are deliberately overstepping that boundary because they feel like they can. Yeah. How then do you, how would you advise you best approach that situation then if they continue to be disrespectful in front of their friends?
Yeah, it's a balance, because when you set boundaries, there needs to be an escalation of consequences if the boundary continues to be transgressed. So on that one occasion where I engaged with my daughter, I chose not to call her out in front of her friends. And when we had the conversation, she understood that. She was very apologetic, and it didn't happen again. Had she continued to behave in that way, then the consequences would have to kick in. Because when you choose to transgress a law, you also lose certain rights and privileges that you have. So it may be that you need to call them out, because you need to call them out in front of their friends. And that may be part of the escalating consequences. But you don't do that as a way to kind of wreak revenge on them or to punish them. Everything that you do should be in order to let them know what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. But at the same time, we need to stay engaged with them. Because if we detach from them, our children can very easily get the impression that the only time when they are acceptable to us is when they're behaving in the way that we want them to. And that's not a message that we want to get across to them. God loves us even when we mess up. He doesn't leave us when we do mess up. So, put the boundaries in place, have those escalating consequences if they choose to continue to violate the boundaries, but at each stage, let them know that you love them, and that you are always going to be there for them. Even though you may have to make difficult choices because of their behavior. Let me just tag on to the end of that. You know, the escalating consequences. One of the most difficult things with setting boundaries is that they have an impact on us. It's hard to set boundaries. And I've known parents who have had to say to their children, look, if you cannot abide by the rules in this house, there's the door. And when those children leave, those parents are heartbroken. They soak their pillows with their tears. They don't stop loving their child, but it's important for our children to know that there are boundaries and there are consequences for violating those boundaries.
Thank you so much.
Right. Thanks very much, Pastor. Okay, our time is up, so I'm not even going to ask for any more questions because I know our time has actually gone over. Again, Pastor, I just want to say a very, very big thank you for your presentation, which has been very, very extremely helpful. So thank you. Just before I pray to close, Pastor, do you want to say something about the session tomorrow?
I would if I could remember what I was presenting on.
crucial role of fathers is tomorrow.
Yeah, crucial role of fathers. Yeah, I mean it is what it is. We are living in a society where the family is under attack, and I think especially the role of fathers is under attack. And there is great evidence that shows that where you have healthy families within a home, it is a protection against all types of ills that our children may experience. So, yeah, we're going to look at how important that role of fatherhood is.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay.